So Dead Boy Detectives is the newest DC TV show. It debuted its entire first season on Netflix last Thursday, and I wasn't actually planning on doing a review for this show, but I don't have any videos planned at the moment, so I thought it would be kind of fun to maybe talk about my thoughts in a pretty quick video. Gonna be fairly spoiler free. I know the show was already out a week, but I'm aware that even inside the DC fandom, this show kind of just came out of nowhere. A lot of the DC fandom either don't know this show was coming out, didn't realize it will be out now, and to be fair, Netflix's marketing for this show was not great. We got a trailer like 2 weeks ago, a poster last week. That was pretty much it, so I don't begrudge anyone for not having seen the show, not knowing it was coming out, or even not knowing that this was DC, because again, the marketing was not great at all. But really quickly, some backstory on the show. So Dead Boy Detectives originally started as a spin-off of Doom Patrol. The characters of Edwin, Charles, Crystal, and Night Nurse all appeared in Doom Patrol's third season episode, Dead Patrol, which was intended to be a backdoor pilot for this show, and this show would have originally been on HBO Max. Then Warner Bros. Discovery went through all their shenanigans, DC shows started getting cancelled, and Netflix ended up picking up the show and changed it so that now it will be in the Sandman universe instead of Doom Patrol. Netflix sort of has this weird, stranglehold on the Vertigo side of DC. They've got Sweet Tooth coming out with a third season next month. The Sandman has got a season 2, and they had the final 3 seasons of Lucifer. All these shows in that sort of little area of comics. But Edwin, Charles, and Crystal were all played by different people in the Doom Patrol episode, with Ruth Connell as Night Nurse being the one person who reprised her role for Dead Boy Detectives. But in terms of the quality of the actual show, what this ultimately meant is that Dead Boy Detectives as a full season feels like it falls somewhere in the middle of these two shows. It sometimes feels like it comes straight from the Sandman, other times it feels like you're watching a side plot from a Doom Patrol episode, and overall I honestly was legitimately quite impressed with the show. I don't think it's amazing or groundbreaking TV, and it definitely feels like a mishmash of a dozen other supernatural TV shows. Like, it has the look of CW's Nancy Drew or Netflix's Sabrina, it has the dialogue of other DC shows, it sometimes feels like a Freak of the Week episode of Supernatural. Like, I cannot say that this show did anything new or unique, because it's absolutely just pulling bits and pieces from everywhere else. But I think I went into this show expecting it to be underwhelming or mediocre, just based off of the fact that it had switched so much over the years. I kind of went into this show with the same mindset I had in the later years of Marvel television, like when I went into Hellstrom, for example. That show had already been cancelled. Marvel was going through so many changes that I just watched the show out of Marvel obligation, and I felt like I sort of watched Dead Boy Detectives for the same reason, out of DC obligation. Not really expecting the show to go past one season, and I wasn't really expecting to enjoy it a crazy amount. But honestly, the more the show goes on, the more you kind of get into it. The show doesn't give you the best first impression. The first episode is a little messy, and it throws quite a lot at you quite fast. The show has this format where every episode is almost split into chapters. Every 5 or so minutes, this giant title screen comes up to signify you're in the next part of the episode. And the first episode goes a little overboard with this, but you're also trying to figure out what kind of tone this show is. So when it starts throwing these chapters at you and introducing so many characters and elements and locations, it makes for kind of a clunky first episode. Charles and Edwin also don't make the greatest first impression, but the show really does start to toughen up and focus itself better after that, and in doing so it makes Charles and Edwin two much stronger characters. There's a later episode in the season that goes through the flashbacks of how both characters ended up meeting each other and being the Dead Boy Detectives, and it does this montage that's both solemn and sad while being sort of wholesome, and it's scenes like that that really reminded me of the more character-focused parts of the Sandman. That, I guess, reminded me of the more interesting parts of the Sandman as well. Like, I think it makes sense to switch out the Doom Patrol version of the Dead Boy Detectives for the new version, because as characters, I think this version of Edwin and this version of Charles fit far more in with the Sandman tone than the original Doom Patrol characters did. But then there are so many side plots with other characters that feel far more like you're watching Doom Patrol. The show's opening credits, to me, scream Doom Patrol completely. But the music in general just feels very Doom Patrol-like. A lot of the individual scenes really feel like the side plot of a Doom Patrol episode, and this creates a show that has a really interesting divide in its tone and in its approach. Now, I'm not sure if it's a great thing, because personally, while I was a big fan of Doom Patrol early on, by season 4, I feel like the vibe and the tone of the show wasn't really landing for me anymore, so I much prefer the parts of Dead Boy Detectives that resemble the Sandman. But I do think it's really interesting. Like, this show is sort of, I guess, a time capsule for this era of DC, where it's this mishmash of various parts of different DC shows that were airing around the time. Like, that's kind of cool. I hope this show does get renewed. I think it's one of those shows that will only get better with a second season. The pieces are all there to make something much stronger, but I don't think a season 2 is likely, mainly because DC is in such a transitional period at the moment with what shows are being allowed to continue and what aren't. But from what I've seen, the show also hasn't made the biggest splash viewing numbers wise, which is the biggest thing for a Netflix show getting renewed. I saw that in terms of other Netflix shows that have gone cancelled, Dead Boy Detectives isn't even close to matching them in views, so that's not a good sign. But Dead Boy Detectives, it was a much stronger show than I expected. Could have been a lot better for sure, but I think it was a really fine show. In terms of DC, there have been much worse first season outings in my opinion, but have you seen Dead Boy Detectives? Did you like it? Did you hate it? Do you have any plans on watching it? Let me know. Subscribing to the channel always really helps out. Liking the video does too. Maybe even sharing it to someone you think might like it. But anyway, hope you enjoyed the video and have an amazing day.